Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this latest edition of the Indica Books Open House with Otis. We invite people to send in their writing samples. Anyone who wants to improve their writing, get feedback on the writing, the art and craft of writing, and so on. And when you send the piece, we ask that you send them in a specific format, and it should be about approximately 800 words in length, so that there is enough material for Otis to review and send feedback on, but not so much that it comes at the expense of other people sending the writing pieces. And when we meet on Sunday, which is around this time, usually we meet at about 8 p.m. India time. So when we do that, this is how we meet. We meet all together. Otis will walk through the pieces. The writers will read an excerpt from their piece, and this is meant to be an interactive session where you ask questions, you read and you see other people's pieces, and you ask questions, and you essentially use this as an opportunity to learn and share your writing experiences with everyone. With that, before I turn this over to you, Otis, I had one question, and this comes to the point about show, don't tell. And I know this is one of the 2 or 3 different very strong foundations of writing that you focus on, apart from obviously the grammatical aspects of it, which are sine qua non. But when it comes to show don't tell, there sometimes, not often enough, but sometimes I do get this. I see this in different fora that. Show don't tell is a relatively modern, new development in writing, and there are enough books that have done well without show that don't follow this adage of show don't tell. And at the end of the day, the reader is interested in a good story. So let's not get hung up about show don't tell, and let's just tell a good story. I have my opinions about it, but I did want to put this out for in front of a wider forum and see if you had any thoughts that you'd want to share in today's session. With that, I'll turn this over to you.
Okay, well, so I think show don't tell is basically a kind of shortcut to understanding something that's a little bit more psychologically significant about the relationship between the writer and the reader through the story. So basically, when we have a story, we have players, right? We have the person who's writing the story, and we have the person who's reading it, and we have this thing in between the two of them, which is the text of the story. Telling is a kind of text, and showing is a different kind of text. And the way that they're different basically has to do with how the information is being perceived by the reader, or let's say between the writer and the reader, right? So when I'm going to make this person the writer and this person the reader, so like that. So when the writer,
just one thing, I feel I'm the only person in this session, so if people want to share their webcams, please do so. It just makes for a more personal, intimate discussion. Thank you.
Yeah,
and I see that Pranshu has joined after a long time.
And
yes,
hey, and also when everyone's here, then it doesn't seem like I'm just scolding Abhinav. But anyway, okay, so show don't tell is it's text, right? So the text is the bridge that goes between the writer and the reader, and when we tell, it's like this person is going like this and it's going like that. And the reader is having the text go to them, hitting them in the head. Okay? That's like when a teacher is standing up in the front of the classroom and telling you what you need to know about science, what you need to know about math, what you need to know about history. Telling. They are telling, you are hearing what they're telling. Showing, on the other hand, is the writer writing these things, putting them out there like this. There's buildings, there's people, there's sunshine, they're doing this, they're doing that. And the reader is reading the text they're taking away the meaning from it. So what it means is that showing, the reader has this engagement where they're looking at the world, they're feeling it in a lot of different ways. They're having all these experiences of the world that the writer is showing. They're just putting it out there, and we're there looking at it, feeling it. We go inside points of view, we have experiences, et cetera, and we take the meaning out. That means that the reader has this level of engagement with their experience that is much more engaged. Strangely, this is the way we grab the reader by the throat and don't let go. When I say that, it can sound like you're doing something to them, but actually what you're doing is you're placing this world in front of them that they attach to and that they don't want to leave. That is how we actually grab them by the throat and don't let go, is by creating their engagement with the world that we create. That said, telling some things is definitely, we do that at times. The reason we come to this phrase, show, don't tell, so often, I think, this is my interpretation, is that those of us who become authors or want to become authors or want to publish, we have a psychological disposition in which we feel like we have something that we want to tell other people. That lean, that, let's say, that psychological lean of so many authors, and let's just say, let's make up a statistic. Ashwani will check it on Google for me. Let's say 98% of people who want to write want to tell people stuff and want to tell them what to think. Ashwani, 98.9%, something like that, right? Because of this incredible disposition of these people who are motivated to write and are motivated to tell other people what to think and what to feel and what to do, this is why we have to say show, don't tell so much to these people. Natural storytellers do not tell people what to think. Storytellers don't do that. Storytellers share stories that the reader then takes things from. Lecturers, academics, philosophers, psychologists, mathematics, all these people want to tell people what to think. So we end up saying show, don't tell a lot to try, it's like putting your finger in the dike of the dam that's flooding the town. It does very little good, basically. But show, don't tell is like that. Okay, Abhinav?
Right. It is. I mean, I am a fan of show, don't tell, but I also sometimes wonder whether, there is a somewhat valid point that other people, writers have, that let's not get hung up on show, don't tell. The story is more important. The plot is more important. Getting the, that is more important. And I say that, okay, I get your point that, having a fixation on show, don't tell can sometimes come at the cost of telling a good story. But fundamentally, I think it is, or it should be, part of good storytelling.
Let's say being able to show is a next level issue in storytelling. This is, I'll go back to the idea that it's about reader engagement. The quality of the reader's engagement with show, don't tell means that they go into the world. So they're going into the world and they're experiencing the world. That's a very intimate connection with the thing that the writer is making. The writer makes this and they get this intimate connection from their reader. It's very valuable. It's like a fusing. It's like a true fusing. Tremendously powerful. From that position of fusing, you can do so much unbelievable things from that position of fusing, because you're creating all the events, you're creating all the buildings, you're creating all the characters, you're creating all the actions. So you basically create this fusing process where this is the sympathetic resonance of the reader with the protagonist character in the world, that they then go through the world itself. And then they feel not like you're telling them about an experience, they feel like they're having an experience. But they're not exactly having an experience, they're having an experience that's designed by you, the writer. So you get to achieve much higher levels of kind of connection, but you don't get to do as much. You don't get to tell the reader what to think about their experience. You have to be good at doing and creating the experience to influence how they feel about it. But they actually feel about it more significantly than they think about it usually. The feeling is actually dominant, but feelings are dominant, I think. Our thinking is, the window dressing on our feelings.
Got it.
But there's plenty of telling. It's not a hard and fast rule. I think it's good to realize it's not a hard and fast rule, and it is a skill. It's a higher level skill to be able to do that. If you're telling a story, it's going this way and it's hitting this person like this. In that case, they're either receptive to what you're telling them, or they're resistant to what you're telling them. But when you show something, you get everybody, because it's not an assault, on them. Anyway, it's worth continuing to think about and definitely try to develop your skill of showing. I think the other part of it is also try and reduce your own ego. This sort of elevated stature that we have of ourselves, that we somehow are a person who's been, touched by God and endued with the power to tell other people what to think. I try and ease off on that, and then just be a person who actually wants to share a story in the best possible way, so that the reader is entertained by it, and they have a good experience with the story, because that's what they really want, because they want to leave their life and their difficulty of their life, and they want to enter into this world instead. We better talk about some of these stories, because I have a ton of them. So we have, I think, like 9 pieces. I think we'll start with Ashwani. I think I missed your piece last week, and there's a couple that I missed. So we're going to start with you, and let's look at it. I'm going to try and have everyone read a little bit, and I'm going to have you talk about it a little bit, and maybe, because we have so many, try to move through it, fairly quickly, and then maybe you will say what you think the issues are with the story, and then I'll see whether I echo that or not. What I find generally among writers, and this was definitely true of me when I went into the workshop, there's like 2 things that could happen, okay? One of them was people would say exactly what I thought was already the problem, but I did not want to admit to myself, okay? Because basically what I want to do when I write something is I want to hit the lottery. It's like putting down the right numbers in order, and then I just want to get millions of dollars. That's all. But I kind of know that maybe the numbers weren't in the right order, and I might not have picked all the right ones. I kind of know that. And I know that I might not win the lottery, but I do not want to admit that to myself. So I bring my lottery ticket to the workshop, and then some people tell me what numbers I got wrong that I thought that I had gotten wrong. Other people tell me things that are just cuckoo, okay? And I don't listen to them at all. But the ones who tell me things that I kind of thought but didn't want to admit, I listen to them. I don't really even have to listen to them. I just know that it's really me understanding that I had to listen to myself a little bit more carefully and not delude myself with the idea that I'd hit the lottery before I'd hit it. Ashwani, that's what we're going to do with you today as an experiment. You're our test subject. Tell us a little bit about this story. Did I share it yet? No. There we go.
Not yet, and it's coming up now. So what I'll also do is I'll, at about the 15-minute mark, I'll raise my hand and say that, it's 15 minutes. So if we need to move to, we need to move to the next one.
Okay. Ashwani, tell us a little bit about this piece and maybe read this first paragraph for us.
Okay, so can you hear me?
Yeah.
This is, an actual thing which happened in somewhere in my distant relative's family, and I thought it made for a good story, so I wrote a story about it. It's about a girl who's grown up and she decides to get married to another girl, and which is quite a shock for the mother. And the mother, this is the question which you asked about what is the internal conflict and what is the external. So to my mind, the internal conflict is the mother herself trying to reconcile herself with the fact that her daughter is not a normal, I won't say normal, but, she's not following the conventions of the normal world. And the external conflict is how she's going to now face not just the daughter, but also all her relatives who are going to be, passing some snide remarks, talking to her caustically, etc., etc.
Okay, let's wait on all that on this analysis a little bit. But you're getting to something that I think is interesting. How is she going to deal with the other relatives? That sounds like that's getting closer to the mark to me. In a sense, if she views this as not being normal, how is she also going to be not, kind of not normal too? Like, how is she going to keep her normal position when this has happened with her child in regard to the other people that she knows? Okay, can you read, I just love your prose style. I would love to hear 2 paragraphs, but I think we better just cut you down to 1. If you could read the first paragraph, I guess, Ashwani.
Okay. Since her move to London, this was the first time that Tina sent a WhatsApp message as a prelude to her weekly call, asking if she could make a video call instead of a voice one. The moment I saw the message, my mother's institution poked me to warn that something was not right. Tina appeared on the screen, her head upright, chin thrust out, a smile precluded by pursed lips. Her first words, obviously a prepared speech, walloped me somewhere in my midriff, leaving me short of breath and of any response, suitable or otherwise.
Okay. Thank you, Ashwani. I always love your prose style. Okay, so what do you think is the issue? What do you think the issue is if I'm mentioning sort of like, you're getting to this place where you're explaining to me what's going on with the story, what the internal and the external conflict is? What does that I'm wondering, what does that tell you about the story, and how might you reapproach the story so that I might not be asking you about these things, the internal and external conflicts?
I think part of the problem with everything not being very clear is that there is no exposition telling you that the mother has never suspected all these years that her grown-up daughter is, is gay, and it's a shock to her. So that is what I was trying to represent in the story, that for the mother, it's a shock. This is the first time she's come to know that her daughter has this tendency.
Okay, let's just put a maybe on that. We'll say maybe. Okay, I love the word maybe. I think it's very useful for us as writers to not have a lot of surety about things, but to instead stay in what John Keats called negative capability, the ability to have doubt, basically. We always stay in a position of doubt. So we'll say, Ashwani, as convincing as that sounds, and you are a very convincing person, let's say maybe. This is a way to think about stories. So we sometimes think about characters and we sometimes think about plots. But I would like to suggest that we should not be thinking about characters and plots. We should think about the two of them together. Every character has their plot. Every plot has its character. People have made fun of me for this hand gesture before, so I'm just letting you know that if you break into laughter about it, then go ahead. But character and plot come together. They are made for each other. This character doesn't have some other plot somewhere else. And this plot doesn't have some other character. They must come together, and they must function in some kind of diametric opposition. This is the conflict of the story. It has both external elements. It has external elements. The plot is an external element, the things that are happening. But it has an internal element, which is in the character. We need to get both of these elements on the page as quickly as possible in our story so that we know that we have them. So we need to have a representation of those early on in the story. As convincing as your argument is about this character, I think that her issue is not about the daughter, because the daughter is the daughter. It's not about the daughter. It's about her. This story is about this character, this mother. What is her issue that this story is going to force her to confront? That's what a story is, because a story is a confrontation between a character who, without a plot, would just go along and never be challenged in their entire life. They are born one way, A, and they go through their story and they end up still being the same A. Nothing has happened to them. They have not changed. I'm going to say a story about a character going through time and not changing is not a story. That is typing. That is typing. A story is a story because something happens. The thing that happens is that a character is confronted by a plot and then they change because of it. So when we think of it that way, we think of the first obligation of story being that we have to get the character and the plot onto the page right away so we know, so the reader knows what the hell is happening. And they want to know, they understand the conflict, and they also anticipate what's going to happen. They care about what's going to happen at the end, and something is going to happen. If the story goes through and nothing happens to the character, then that's a false story, and you're never going to get another reader for the rest of your life, I think. So we have to have these things happen. So I would guess, because I think about it in this way, I think that the mother's problem is actually one of status and her position in the community. She thinks that she has a secure position in the community. She's a widow, right? Her husband, who's dead, was the patriarch of the family. And she's just the one that's trying to sustain and keep it together until she dies, basically. Everything stay the same. But then the daughter comes in, boom, creates this problem. That sets up what will end up happening. The mother and the daughter, this issue with the daughter in a continuous confrontation, but not only her, of course, the community around the mother, because that's who she needs to impress, not the daughter. That's who she needs to keep in line. That's who she needs to have not think things about her that are divergent from what she wants them to think about her. And that's probably somewhere where the story is. But my point in talking about it is to say, what happens in this story in the beginning that you've written, even though we don't know clearly what's happened yet, so you could think about that. We don't know clearly what the plot is. It takes a while for us to get to it, but I love your writing and that's okay. The plot is here. Ashvani, what isn't here? It isn't the backstory of the daughter. The daughter is here on the page. The plot is here. What isn't here?
The conflict of the mother.
Right. The mother isn't here. It's all of this stuff happening. The daughter's done this, the daughter's done this, the daughter's done this, but we don't actually have the mother on the page. We don't have a depiction of what her internal conflict is. If I were thinking about her internal conflict, it is one of, and it's actually the conflict of every character, that they want things to stay the same, right? They want stasis. You know, they're continued, you know, we can think about it as status or whatever, however we want to think of it. We don't want to be lowered in status. We want just the way things are. The one thing that is true of all of our characters universally throughout all time is the one thing they want is for nothing to change. The plot forces them to change. That's why it's a story. That's why a story about a character who does not change is not a story, it's just typing. So, yeah.
No, I've got it. I said that. I've understood.
So get her on the page. You know, we need her doing whatever the things are. Like now we can talk a little bit about Abhinav's show don't tell. I would say rather than tell what the mother is like, right? It's in first person, right? So that can make it hard for the first person to reveal things about themselves. So you have to have her reveal things about herself that she doesn't really want to reveal. But that's really what you have to do. You know, what are her concerns? And then she's confronted by this issue, something that's unavoidable. She just wants to stay under the radar. She wants to get through, retain her status, retain her relationships with her relatives and all of that, have people look at her a certain way, and she does not want them to look at her another way. Boom, you have your problem, the daughter. Now what's going to happen? And I care. Because the things that she wants, even if I am not going to say they're petty, nothing that a human being wants is petty. Everything that we want is massively important to us. Wanting to have things stay the same, wanting things to be safe, trying to avoid confrontation with the world around us, these are not petty things. They're big things, and we really want them. So she's not petty. She's not dumb. None of those things. She's human, and I can be on board with her for that. So I think it's a great start, but you got to turn it. You can't just be about like a story isn't about a difficult situation. A story is about a character trying to make things their way and the plot that forces them to do it a different way. Ashvani, wonderful work as always. I love reading your prose.
Thank you.
I love how you delve into the character, your attention, your care. I think of it this way, like, so I don't think, so remember we talked about show don't tell? I don't think the role of a storyteller is to tell people what to think. So get rid of that. I mean, who am I? Who am I to tell anyone what to think, Ashvani? I mean, can you imagine? It's laughable. But what we should do is we give attention to human beings. That's what we do. And the attention we give to human beings, and you do this, Ashvani, with your prose, our attention is love, right? It's not love like puppy dog love, like little kitty cat, drinking tea love. It's love for humanity. We're giving our time and our life and our attention to the struggles of human beings. And that's what we give to everybody. That's, I think, the gift of the storyteller. Not dictating how people should think. So you're right on the cusp of writing those stories because of the wonderful attention you give to your characters. All you now have to see is this other little issue. And it's very common for all of us as writers to avoid it because everyone on earth is conflict avoidant. We're all conflict avoidant, I hate to tell you. Even people who engage in conflicts are conflict avoidant. They just think that they can avoid conflicts by being aggressive. It's still conflict avoidant. So we all, as human beings, avoid conflict, but in stories, it is about conflict. These two things coming together and producing a change in the character, which means something has happened, not nothing. If you have a character confronted by a plot and they remain the same, that means nothing's happened. Basically, from my point of view. I used to say, if a tree falls in the forest and it doesn't change character, it doesn't matter whether it made a sound or not. So, okay, let's talk about next. Now, Sri Charan was here and he said he had a poor internet connection. So I think maybe he got off. He also gave me something last week that I didn't read.
Sri Charan said he's traveling, so he won't be able to make it because he has a very poor connection where he is.
Okay. Thank you, Ram. Okay, so let's look at here. Pranshu, am I saying that? Let's talk about your piece a little bit. Nice to see you.
Oh, okay, the Golden Knuckle. Okay, I thought you had sent me comments on the other one, but yeah, we can talk about it. Yeah, we can.
I gave you this one. This one is the one I read. Okay, yeah. So I wasn't able to read both of them. Let's talk about. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing in this piece, but keep it short, and then we'll have you read a little bit of it, and then we'll talk about it. Okay.
So in this, this is basically sort of the beginning of the story. This is about the shared roots anthology regarding Cambodia. So this is where the two main characters, so the narrator Ilaputra, he meets with Condé, the hero, the cultural father of Cambodia. So this is the location. Basically, this is where they meet. So I was like, you should have some internal conflicts and change. So there's this Ilaputra has been working with the Panda royal family for last 40 years plus, and he is one of the survivors of the war. So there is a bit of I try to portray that what would somebody like him, who would have lived his whole life with a group of people, and then now most of them are gone. So he sees his dead friends. He talks to his dead friends when they are part of the characters. He converses with, and he's meeting with this character. And you are right. Actually, one thing I take a long time revealing it. So this this guy he meets, right, Condé. So he will replace him as the new, you could say the new friend in his life, right? So that he will continue his journey. So that's the change I wanted to portray. He will no longer see his dead friends going forward because he has somebody else. And then there's a backstory. I think I will redo the story a little bit and work on it, that he did save that kid's life when he was a baby, because he's more of a healer than a warrior. So
let me stop you, and then let's have you read a little bit. Why don't you read the beginning? Maybe just, let's see, do I have this? Okay, I have this. Oh, come on. What are you doing? Come on, you silliness. Okay, maybe just to there would be great.
start from the top or start from?
Yeah, start from the top and read down to that orange line if you see it.
Yeah. In one day in the glorious Dhanrajya, we will convert our swords and bows back into plows and arni sticks and open a school together. That will be our greatest legacy, and that is why we fight. In the entrance to the old school of the son of Drona, the inscription was carved bearing the name of Yudhamanyu, my dear friend Danu. That school and easy walk seemed the right place for the meeting, a convenient locale away from the hustle and bustle of the chaos of the Ashwamedh Yagna happening around us, located near the Kekai and Kekai Skandawar war camps, where most of the Ashwamedh army and the visiting guests were housed. In this large school of the son of Drona, now that of Vishok, the school that never. Sorry, I have to move my. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. The large school of the son of Drona, from now that of Vishok, the school that never sleeps, with dance performances, night song festivals, with yeah, that's I'm trying to pronounce it correctly. It basically means back and forth.
Okay.
Yeah. So with the debates that go on through the night of an active university where the thought is free, the mind unchained by narrow domestic walls. The morning began early when the messenger from Yogacharya asked me to meet his son. I had told him that I will be available at the school later in the day.
Okay, great. Okay, so yeah, so when I was reading this, I think this is a great, when at some point I think that the Indic group, you should have some workshops yourselves where you respond to each other's work. The way I tend to, so you'll notice with me, my base is sort of my feeling about something, right? Because I'm not reading to be intellectual, and I'm not reading in order to apply a bunch of rules that I have saved up. That's not how I read at all, and that's not how I come up with anything either in terms of my advice. What I do is I read, and I feel my impressions. I just read, and I'm like, what's happening for me while I'm reading this? Then, because I have done it for a long time in regard to my own work, and I've read a lot of other people's work, from there I go, okay, I felt these things. What would I do to make me maybe have different feelings? So, and that's, for all of you, what I've found with people that I've taught is they do that second part less well, right? They're coming up with the ideas of how to fix things, or sometimes they start with the ideas of how to fix things before they've even felt anything, right? So they do that less well, and I generally, in my workshops, I try to get people not to play the role that I play in terms of shaping people's work afterwards, but I do encourage everyone to have the feelings that they have, because those are really valuable for the reader. My feelings here, you write very good sentences. I remember that. The main thing is there is so much information coming at me that I'm overwhelmed. A story is basically a very simple thing. So this is something, we know, right? We don't only read complex stories. In fact, we seldom read complex stories. We have thousands of stories, maybe millions of stories that are so simple. A child can tell a story, right? A child can tell a story, and we tell stories to children and they understand them. They're simple in terms of their construction. They go back to what I was saying to Ashwani, a character in epic literature, like the Mahabharata or the Iliad, that I'm more familiar with, that I've actually read all the way through, or the Odyssey. That epic literature was both telling a story, but also chronicling a history. And it was a mnemonic device that we used before we had writing to write things down, right? So we included a lot of information that we used sort of these mnemonic devices of rhythm and patterns of various
I have to break that pattern. Yeah, I realize that I tend to follow that a lot. Try to add those mnemonic.
And so like this, now when I discovered this is about ghosts, it reminds me of the section in the Odyssey where Odysseus goes into Hades and he meets
all the shades.
Yeah, he meets all the shades, right? And all the shades are interested in what their human, progeny are doing above, right? That's all they care about. Because they're all the same, right? They're just the shades. And this can remind me of that. It's like a chronicle, or like in the Old Testament, right? So that's the Jewish Bible, right? We have all those, so and so and so and so beget so and so, and we go through all the progeny, right? That's the kind of patterns that come out of oral literature, right? That's the kind of patterns that come out of like, we need to remember all our histories and go back to the ancestry, and we repeat them every night and we learn them. And some people are the storytellers and they're good at it, and some people are not, et cetera, et cetera. So this to me reads like that, but a story in the modern sense of a story is a very simple thing. We don't need epic literature to hold all of our history anymore because we can write it down, right? So when Sanskrit developed, that changed everything. When cuneiform developed, it changed everything. When Greek developed, it changed everything, because now these histories could be written down. That's how you get that transition between the oral storytelling tradition and then Homer, who maybe told the story to scribes who wrote it down for him.
Right.
So the story in the modern sense is much more what I'm talking about with Ashvani. We want to have these very clear things that are represented. Usually it's a protagonistic force, right? But in a short story, we often make that just one person. And then we make that, we've called this form the hero's journey, according to Joseph Campbell. But it basically means that they're trying to do something, and then they're being thwarted by the world around them, the force of antagonism or the plot, right? I want to find the Holy Grail, but there's a dragon, right? That's confronting them. And so, and then what's going to happen as the knight confronts the dragon? Will they get the Holy Grail or not? That's a story. And so that kind of essential clarity is for me missing in the beginning here, where I'm just reading information. And since I'm not getting something and I'm not wondering about what's going to happen, then it keeps me from that story. Right. So it's a hard thing to reconcile, actually, because it gets to that place where, like, well, if we want the person to read it, yes, we have our own reasons for wanting to write it, but our real problem, our antagonist as writers, is that pesky reader on the other side. How do we get them to read it? We have no control over them at all. The way we get them to read it is we tell them basically what the story is right away. Tell them what the two teams are, right? The protagonist and the antagonist, and tell us why it matters. In Ashvani's story, it's the widow. Why does this matter? Why is her status important to her? Why does she? But what matters to her matters to all of us. It's universal. And so we both wonder what's going to happen between the two sides. Will the knight win or the dragon win? But we also care about what's going to happen. Those are the two essentials.
Right.
And so, yeah, I mean, I love your sentences. I always do. And I even want to understand them. I will say I want to understand them, but there's so much information coming that I finally can't. If you asked me, even though I've probably read it, in the Old Testament Bible, who beget whoever, I could not tell you. When Odysseus goes into Hades, I think I only remember Ajax, because I've always just loved the name Ajax. So, so try and form something immediately so that we can understand the story. And then in regard to this world, you also write incredible worlds. I go back to this fundamental issue, is that the reader, the only thing we know, we want to get the reader, right? That pesky reader who is our nemesis. They are truly our nemesis. We do everything to try and get them to read our book, but we know something very important about the reader. The important thing we know about them is that they want to leave their world behind and go into our world.
Right.
So we have to create that world for them to go into. They have to understand what's happening in it, and they have to care about what's happening in it. Those are the three things: create the world, make them understand what is happening and why they should care about what's happening, and we're done.
Right.
When I think of you, though, in your writing, you write like I'd write. Okay, I have to admit about myself, I can type like hell. I really can, you know, and I think you can type like hell. I mean, you can write sentence after sentence after sentence. You write great sentences. You write in multiple languages, right? I also like writing in multiple languages, but anyway, I type like crazy. And the other day I wrote something, this little introduction to my novel, and it was 3,000 words. And then the next day I sat down and it was 6,000 words. And by the third day it was 11,000 words. So
yeah, I understand.
Then I was like,
yeah.
Right. Now I'm going crazy. So I had to take huge parts of it and throw them away and be like, what am I trying to do? You know, I threw out 5,000 words. There are many writers who would kill to write 5,000 words, not me. I write 5,000 words in a day, easily. So
yeah, I understand where you're. See, this was like, as I said, like this was when I started writing, it went up to 37,000 words, and then I brought it down to around 13, 14,000. So yeah, that's why it's looking as if, you know, a lot of information is missing, and all that is because I have to redo it to just as a thinking of it as a 5,000 or 8,000 word, you know, story at the beginning.
You might like a program that I use. It's called Scrivener. I would suggest it to anyone working in longer works. Maybe you already use it. But what's key to my process is I write all these things and then I make them into parts. Right? I don't think in a linear way, but I can see the linearity once I create the parts, and I'm like, okay, the first thing I usually have to do is reshuffle it to make it have continuity. Then I look at the parts where I'm just writing and I'm not even involved in the story at all, and I have to take those out because that's just me thinking. I use typing and writing to think. When I'm not typing, I'm going to tell you, I do not do any thinking. I rest.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I totally
rest.
Get that. Yeah, I totally get that.
I'm not. My partner says, "Hey, we had to talk about this." I'm like, "Well, get a piece of paper and a pencil because I'm not going to do it unless we write it down." I do not think. I rest when I'm not typing, and when I'm typing, I'm typing. So I feel confident that you'll get back at this and work like I do. I mean, I throw out chunks. I do this. Writing, typing is not an issue for me. I don't think it is for you. Organize this. It can be, if you have trouble unstucking yourself, you know, like you feel wed to your language, just put up in the front, put experiment. And then you can even put up, Otis says, need external and internal conflict up front.
Right.
You just write that. And then force yourself to do it. And just say it's an experiment. You just say, he's crazy. He has nothing of value to tell me, but he said this and I'm just going to try it.
And definitely.
Yeah. I enjoyed looking at it, and I appreciate your style. I have a similar style. So okay, we better move on. Madhavi, let's look at yours work. You sent me something pretty early. Let's see, Madhavi.
Hi. It's ancient Hindu science.
Ancient Hindu science. Why am I not seeing? Oh, there we go. Okay. So this is a book review, and it's a book review of this ancient Hindu science, which sounds like a fascinating book.
It is.
So go ahead and send that to me. I appreciate it.
Sorry, I missed your words. What did you say?
Well, I said I appreciate you sending that to me.
Oh, I lost my earphones. So
I love work like that, and it sounds like it's a little bit academic, and he has a lot of proofs in it, and does a lot of research. So I think that sounds really interesting. Okay,
I got to read this book thanks to Indica Reviewers Club.
Wait, what's that?
The Reviewers Club, which Indica has.
Oh,
I joined it recently, so this is the first book I'm reviewing.
Oh, okay, great. Maybe you could read the first two paragraphs to us. Okay, I'm all right with this. And
this reader finds the book to be a treasure trove of ancient knowledge. The knowledge, though ancient and possessed by the ancient Hindus, is by no means outdated. It is still relevant and will always be. It is the very foundation on which many civilizations have thrived and will continue to do so. The author, Professor Alok Kumar, has done an in-depth research on the topics that he has presented in his book. The sheer amount of data he has collected and the knowledge he commands on each of the topics that he has covered is overwhelming. Professor Kumar has neatly divided his subject matter under various disciplines of science. He talks about mathematics, physics, chemistry, biology, and medicine. He also discusses the global impact of the Hindu ways and their knowledge had on the world then and now.
Okay, great. So I think a number of you are part of the Reviewers Club, and if you're not, I suggest that you do become a part of it. And it's a great place to try your hand at doing some writing and kind of looking at the structure of books and dealing with them. We did a review. Ram, I think, did we do your review the other day? Yeah, I think we did.
Yes, it was.
So I think a number of you are doing reviews. So maybe from looking at the beginning, do you have any feelings, early on in terms of this review? I love it. We have a larger conversation.
You're asking for Ram's input or mine?
No, anyone, really anyone. Yeah, Madhavi, your input. Yeah, sure. What do you think?
About this particular book or in general the review?
What do you think now? What do you think about the review that you've written? Like, to evaluate it, what do you think are places where it might be strengthened?
Well, I actually wanted to include a lot of material in there, but I was not sure whether I should be mentioning the other works that he has referred, because he has data like from documented facts from 800 BCE. So when I'm writing about this particular book and this particular author that I want to concentrate on, should I be including the other authors? I had no idea about that.
Are there other authors of this particular book?
No. I mean, the ones that he has referred and the ones that he mentions in his text. So should I be including that? I was totally clueless about that part. Okay, well, at times it does sound vague somewhere.
Yeah.
Like,
So let me. I'm just going to highlight this word here. Okay. Overwhelming. Overwhelming is not a good feeling.
Okay.
So that's my basic feel. My basic impression. I don't know if any of you enjoy feeling overwhelmed, but I don't enjoy feeling overwhelmed, because when I feel overwhelmed, I feel like I've lost control of things. And I, in the last piece, I was just saying, actually, I felt somewhat overwhelmed by the number of details that I was getting when I did not understand the basic story. So let's take that as an idea and apply it here. So when I talk about the basic story, you know, when we're telling a story, I'm saying there's a conflict between the protagonist and the antagonist. That is the context for everything else that takes place in the story. It's a context. The details can be overwhelming, and they're particularly overwhelming if I don't understand them within the context. And so I would say that the same is the issue actually here, where I really need to understand the context for this book so that I can understand what place it has, this book. So there's two things. There's a large context of, let's say, literature in general, or let's say books about science or whatever it might be. We have some large group, and this is a book within it. So this is a book that's within this context. And generally, it's like this. This context, literature, is one of the players in the conflict between two things, literature, and then this book is doing something to the literature. That's the largest context. And it's as if this book is a protagonist versus literature that is an antagonist. And there's a conflict between the two of those things. I know that's a little bit heady, but I think the first thing I would want to know here is about the context. So I feel like this book is trying to do something. It has a thesis statement of some kind. It is trying to kind of right a wrong. We could look at it that way. So, and I think the right that it might be wronging, or the wrong that it might be righting, is that literature has not paid attention to ancient Hindu science. And this book is demanding that it does. Does that sound kind of in the ballpark?
Yeah.
Okay. I have not read the book, but I am understanding that the book does exist in this larger context, and sort of like presenting the story, you know, the protagonist or the book versus this world of antagonism. That is a great context to present in the beginning so that we're not confused about what's going on here in the biggest picture possible. Does anyone else can anyone else maybe chime in or comment on that? Are you understanding what I'm saying in terms of looking at a book within the context and presenting that early on? Because I think it's that context that the reader is either going to be interested in or not, right? If I'm not interested in the way Hindu science is confronting, you know, let's say tradition, you know, Hindu science is demanding that it be acknowledged in the face of Western science that has acted like it's the only science on Earth, right? If I'm not interested in that, then I'm not going to read it, right? But if I am interested in it, or if you can make me interested in it, then I am going to read the book. And so I think that kind of focus is important. Does anyone else, are you understanding a little bit about what I mean about creating this large context, Rohini?
Yeah, what I would like to know is, how did you react to the book? Did you enjoy it? Did you, as you used the word overwhelmed, you know, what was, if I want to read a book, I want to know whether the other person enjoyed reading it or not, and why.
It was definitely interesting, enjoyable,
Right.
but too much crammed into the small book.
Well, I think that
So that's why I use the word overwhelming, because people who are not interested in science generally may not be interested in knowing the roots, from where the inspiration comes for the Western researchers.
Mm-hmm.
So those roots lie in India and our ancient knowledge. So being a science student, I actually enjoyed reading it, but I'm not sure others would. I just wanted to present my idea that it's a really good, interesting topic.
Well,
I've read a lot of books on Hindu science, but I would really like to know whether you enjoyed this one or not, because then would I pick up this one or would I pick up another one? I think I would like a review to help me decide on that.
I'll come back with another review on this. Like Otis says, maybe restructure it a bit and present it to you.
Well, I think it's important to. I agree with you, Rohini, that like her reaction is great, and that's something to then definitely deal with. That's one part of what the review should do. But I do think that one part of the review should be to contextualize this book in a larger literature so that I understand what you're saying. I think that your question, why this book over other books, is a great question that, Madhavi, you should write that down.
Okay.
Because in a way, when you review a book, you can go down kind of a list of questions. What is the largest context of this book and other books? What is it trying to do, right? What is this book specifically trying to do with other books that are like this book? And what does it do differently, better, or worse than other books in the same field, right? Who is going to read this book? That is a great thing to address, because if you're going to, like Rohini, you're saying that you've read a lot of books about Hindu science.
Yeah.
That might be because you're Indian and you're Hindu, right? So you're reading those books. But is someone who's not Indian and not Hindu going to be interested in reading this book? Is there a wider audience for this book? That would be good to be able to address. You know, are bigoted white people and, you know, colonialists, are they going to pick up this book? Are they going to be challenged by this book, right? These are all great things to try and address too, because you're trying to write something to reach a reader to achieve either one thing or the other, either to tell them to read it, like to communicate them you should read it, or to communicate to them that you're not going to want to read it. And that is basically a process of figuring out who is the audience. And to do that, you have to put out your first largest context. Who is going to be interested in, you know, this issue of Hindu science, basically, let's say, versus, you know, the Western science and its lack of appreciation. So that's the first filter. Then it's going to be another filter between other books that cover the same topic. And we work our way down. And if someone reads through the entire review, then you know that you basically have them and they're interested, right? Because what's going to happen is anyone who's our audience, right? We have the whole world as our potential audience. They're going to be able to glance their eyes over 1,000, if they were just looking at reviews, let's say 1,000 reviews a day. They're going to look at the title first. They're going to look at the first sentence next. And every step of the way, you're going to be losing hundreds of readers. But you have to make sure you keep the largest amount for as long as you can. That's what we're trying to do. So gather them with your title, hook them with the conflict, the major story that's taking place, and then discuss the book within that context. But I think it's a great start. I mean, even what Rohini is saying, like, I do not know of these other books, right? I don't know of the research that this is drawing upon. And I know for sure that I don't want to read something by like an American white guy who's living in a yurt in the woods of Oregon telling me about Hindu science. So I know I don't want that, because they had a spirit journey and their spirit animal told them all of these truths. So those are not things I want. But I have plenty of access to those books. I'm telling you, I can go to any bookstore here in Oregon and I can find hundreds of books that will tell me about someone's spirit journey into Hindu medicine. I promise. Okay, work on this. I would, but Mojave, the other way to look at reviews is do a little bit of work on it, and until you feel, you know, that you've done the best you can. All of the things that we work on, all of the things we write. Hemingway said this, and I think it's very true psychologically. Nothing is ever finished, only abandoned. So work on it for as long as you have an interest in it, then send it out, post it wherever you want to put it, contribute in that way, and then do another review and keep doing that.
Thank you.
Abhinav, how are we doing on time?
We're doing good. I think we have time to do one more.
Okay. So let's see. That's Sritran. I don't, who's the author of Magical Birthday and Are You Here? I don't know. Don't think so. So there, there's one that I want to look at for today, if I can. So, okay, can I look at this one? So when you send me your work, it's very helpful to me if you put your name on the work itself, because of the way I work with your documents. I move it to a different program, but then I send it back to you from that program, and it will track your email address if I know your name. But if I don't know your name, I cannot track your email address, and I don't want to bore you with my very difficult life here with the hippies and the yurts and not being able to track your email address, but please put your name on the document itself. Who wrote this? That was my Keanu Reeves Matrix imitation.
Birthday Magic was written by me.
Oh, I was just wondering about Mekong to Kaveri right now. But Vandana.
No, Birthday Magic.
Okay, let me talk about that one if we do not have this this author here. But I don't know who it is. I'm sorry to say. Going once, going twice. Okay. Vandana, let's look at Birthday Magic. Thank you. I didn't see you here that second ago. Okay. Let's have you read a little bit and then let's talk about it. Maybe, I don't need that. These first two paragraphs, please.
Okay. The mirror reflected red, swollen, crying eyes. She wanted to wash it off. Her heart was aching. She wanted to forget the pain. Tomorrow was a special day for her. She mumbled a silent prayer in her heart. She wanted to be happy, at least on her birthday. The morning sun woke her up. The birds chirped on her window. The blue sky presented an amazing view. She ran across the green grass. She wanted to devour every minute of the day, with or without anyone. Running across the grass, feeling the breeze on her face and the greenery on her foot was heavenly. She was one with the nature.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so I'll go back to my thing about getting impressions, and then I have things that I base as strategies to work on pieces. I have noticed in my long career of teaching that there can be kind of two sorts of stories. some stories, and some stories seem to just stay in one place, right? They're like, I don't know if any of you have this experience. I have it a lot. I used to have it a lot, and I've worked very hard to pass through this. But I used to have a kind of a story about myself that I told over and over again. And every time I met any circumstance, I told the same story about myself. It was what I call a circular narrative. And the thing that happens with a circular narrative is that it's kind of imprisoning, and you never actually grow from it. You just remain in a place. And whether that place is good or not good doesn't really matter. It always is just one place that you stay. And staying in one place is kind of imprisoning, and being imprisoned is always bad. Does that make sense? So whether it's good, whether it's a good narrative or a bad narrative or any kind, the thing when it's circular is it's sort of imprisoning. And when I read this story, it kind of made me just sad. You know, it made me a little bit depressed, kind of was my reaction to it. And it reminded me of the kind of circular narratives that I've had in my life that have been, you know, because I didn't, well, let's say my circular narratives were like how I could always take care of myself and I didn't need anybody and I was tough and I was, you know, like, I was just like a little, like a walnut, you know, I was a walnut against the world. It doesn't go anywhere. And I think that there's a place in our writing that can be cathartic for us. And this is how I've actually used my writing. And this is the process that I've taken, is that I was not in a very good place and I wanted to be in a better place. And the way I did that was to try and make something to make these stories. And I think the key element to making a story that takes us as writers from one place to another place is not, as I wrote for about 20 years, the same narrative that I had been thinking to myself all those years before, but instead to write a narrative that moved on in a linear frame. Am I making some sense? If anyone nodded, yes, you're making a little bit of sense, that would help me. Okay, so I want to make a little bit of sense. Thank you, Ashwan. No matter how bad and how tough our story is to tell, and I think it's really important that we know that stories can deal with the most difficult information that we have. Horrible, I don't want to overstate it, but horrible things are happening in the world. There's no doubt about it, okay? Absolutely. And stories are able to deal with them, but they're able to deal with them when they move through time. So, because if it's moving, we create this feeling of not imprisonment, not a circular narrative, but a feeling that something is going to happen and we don't know what it is. Having the expectation that something is going to happen is very, very important for us psychologically as writers, and it's very important for the reader as they're reading the piece. If the reader feels like they're in a circular narrative, I'm going to say that they don't have a good experience. I've had some heartbreaking experiences reading people's narratives that just go in a circle because I can feel their imprisonment in their narrative. So Vandana, this is a lot to say about your short piece, I know. So I hope it doesn't come too much like it's like, oh my goodness, I wrote a 3-page piece and Otis dropped a brick house on me. But I'm trying to just make this small point about having a story that moves in a linear process, not one that's just internalized in our head, which is very common for us, for all of us. I think all of us, we come up with internal narratives that we tell over and over again, and they keep us safe in a way, but they also have the residual effect of imprisoning us in a story that's always repeating itself. And that it's important to try and lengthen it out and have it take place in time so that you start someplace, A, right? Ashvani, we're going to bring you into this because I know you're going to be able to answer this. We have the character enter the scene, and then what's going to happen? Like Jaws. Right? We have a conflict, and then we have something happen from that, and then we have another one, and we move from A, not to A again. Not to A. That's circular. We move from A to B, which means that something has changed. And even if change is bad, even if change is tragic, or if it's transcendent, that feeling of movement is hopeful. That was my long speech, Vandana. And so I want to encourage you. I like this story about this girl, but I want to put her in a situation of like reality and have her engage with actions of other characters. I want her to meet an antagonistic force, and I want something to happen out of those encounters. And that's the way I would like to try and lead you in your next story.
Sure. I'll try.
I know. I'm so sorry. I know I'm dropping a huge load on you. And I hope you can see that this is after a very developed, like sort of psychological, philosophical wrestling match that I've had with stories because I have had this. I just want to say that maybe I'm projecting onto you unnecessarily, but whenever I get something that gives me the feelings of these stories that I used to tell myself and how imprisoned I felt, I know how terrible that was for me. So, and I know that the way I was able to sort of move out of that psychology, of that circular psychology, was to really internalize this idea that stories had to move forward. Didn't matter how bad it got, and it gets bad, but so long as there was some chance available at the end for change, that was the important thing.
I hope
yeah, go ahead, Vandana.
Yes, I will surely. I'll try next time not to go in the circular one.
Okay, yeah. The characters, create that conflict. Ashvani is going to lead the way with his piece next week. We're going to see the opening lines, maybe a rewrite of this piece, and he's going to show us exactly how it's done, and we're going to analyze it. We're going to see two paragraphs. One paragraph, the first one is either going to be the external conflict, and the second one is going to be the internal conflict. So that means the plot, and then the protagonist right on the page right away, or we're going to see it reversed.
Sure.
Get the story rolling. Rohini will also give us something we know with someone engaged in a ferocious battle. Okay, Abhinav, is that it for today? And we'll have to
yes, I think we are pretty much at the top of the 90 minutes that we have, and I think we've gone through a lot of pieces. It was great to get so many people sending in pieces, and we, I think, barreled through how many, 6 or 7 reviews, writing pieces. We reviewed 6 or 7. I think there's still a couple of ones remaining, but this was great. And again, as I said, there is a WhatsApp group, and that is strictly optional for people who want to continue the discussion or exchange messages or anything. So it would be good if people found it useful, joined, and then continued some of the conversations with respect to point of view or other aspects of writing on that group. I think it will definitely help. But again, as I said, it's optional.
I don't know who can I share something just to round out our whole discussion? Okay, so Abhinav, you asked about show don't tell. And the reason I wanted to do this piece, who I do not know the author is, and the author does not seem to be here, and I'm not going to be able to pronounce the names correctly. I just wanted to read this first paragraph to you. Okay. Pratipa stood leaning against one of the many magnificent pillars in the temple, gazing at nothing in particular, his mind imagining a place hundreds of miles away from his town. Moonlight filled the serene courtyard. I would cut serene. Moonlight filled the courtyard, illuminating the entire place. Janavi, his mother, was humming some prayers while sorting out huge piles of bilva flowers. Okay, so I've cut out serene. I've cut out gently because those are subjective words, right? So I'm wondering, because I'm not sure that I'm exactly in the mind of the characters, so I wonder who has that subjective thought, so I cut those. But I want to say that basically when I read this paragraph, I drop right into the story and point of view. I will tell you, even though I have a sneaking suspicion, and those of you who have been here a lot will know that I feel like we're putting in, maybe we're not going to get to the story, and the story really has to, we're embedding a little exposition, this imagining a place hundreds of miles away. I don't really, when we open a story, the story is here. We need the story on the page. The story isn't somewhere else. And the story is not between other characters that are not on the page. The story is here and now, right? Ram Dass said, be here now. That's what happens in stories too. Be here now. But aside from those little things, I'm very happy to be in this world, in this temple with the mother, the character leaning up against something, and she's separating the flower petals. That's a wonderful place for me to be. So I offer that all to you, and let's learn from it.
Thank you, everyone. We will put this session recording on YouTube along with the previous 53, 54 sessions. There's a playlist that contains all of the sessions. Keep writing, keep sending, and we'll keep having these sessions. And thank you all for joining. We'll talk to you again next Sunday at 8 p.m. India time. 8 p.m., not 8:30 p.m. Bye.
Thank you, Otis.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Otis. Thank you, Abhinav.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.